Well, it's October 3rd, a Monday, which is, of course, the most boring day starting the week. But, however, as I always say, let's making fun and exciting on this particular episode. So, today, we'll be reviewing a past event prior before who's going to top by DDT Pro Wrestling that took place on I believe, the 18th, which is the celebration of the 30th anniversary of wrestling legend Jun Akiyama. And of course, we got special surprises taking place. We have Yuji Nagata, who made his appearance, and also Yoshinoburi Kanemaru. After that, we have All Japan Pro Wrestling coming out of their Nippon Budokan event, where they go to Mania in Korakuen Hall on the 19th, which I'm kind of curious how things have changed ever since the Budokan event. And then, of course, the latest GCW event in Japan, Dead on Arrival, that took place on the 27th of September, but it was streamed on the 1st. And then finally, 8 matches coming from AEW Dark Elevation. We're going to see who has appeared, what matches they were in. And of course, we'll be reviewing the 3 press conferences that Stardom had, of course, involving the New Blood 5, which wrestlers who nobody has ever heard of appeared, who will be making appearance. And of course, we got the IWGP Tournament Championship taking place soon. Apparently, we're going to see of the overall decisions they're going to be making for this. And of course, what teams will be involved in this year's Goddesses Tag League. And then finally, an event taking place on the 3rd of November. What championship matches will be participating, what special matches will be taking place. And then finally, some news updates to see what's been going on in the world of pro wrestling. So, get ready for another episode of the Deleted Wrestle Zone.
Are you ready? Get up, get up! 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 Get up, get up!
Welcome everybody to the Deleted Wrestle Zone, all things that is pro wrestling with AEW, NXT, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Impact Wrestling, the National Wrestling Alliance, various promotions, wrestlers, matches, and championships. I am your host, J-Rod here. So, let's begin with DDT Pro Wrestling with the 30th anniversary of Jun Akiyama, who's a wrestling legend, if you guys know that. And if you guys know this as well, he was the one who blessed Konosuke Takeshita to do the jumping knee that he's been using as a finisher, which, of course, was Akiyama's finisher as well. It opened up with, of course, a bit of the burning showdown between 2 team members, of course, the younger members, and the much learning curve group. We got Yuya Koroku versus Yusuke Okada. Now, as you know, Burning, they always have to show who the strongest, and I think in this particular match, I kind of figured it was going to go with Yusuke Okada, who has a bit more of experience better than Koroku, but he picked up a good win when he applied a somewhat of a, similar to a brainbuster, but it's not, but you get the right idea, allowing him to win the match. Now, our next match, we have an 8-man tag match. We have, of course, the boss of DDT, Shinjiro Takagi, teaming up with members of Disaster Box, Kazuki Irada, and Toto Washi, and of course, the much funniest guy on the planet, Antonio Honda, taking on the fruitcakes, the pheromones. Now, you know the pheromones, how they are when it comes to this. We have, of course, Dino, what's his name? Dino, Takeda, Inamara, and of course Ino. Now, we all know how this is going to play it out with these guys. They're not going to play by the rules. They always try to undermine the general manager's authority. Not to mention, Takagi can't stand Dino every single time he's trying to play his little sexual innuendos in his matches. However, Ino was about to cross the line by taking off his last piece where you can see him completely naked, which he did not want. The general manager made the decision to call it a no contest and make sure they cover his ass up. So basically, it did not. Of course, Tagagi had enough of this. I don't know what he said on the promo because there was no English translation, what we did like in the recent DDT event. But I'm sure there's going to be some interesting dynamics between the pheromones and whoever stands in their way. Next up, we got a very interesting trios match. We got Yukio Naya teaming up with Soma Takao and Akito to take on Eruption members Hideki Okatani, Yukio Sakaguchi, and, of course, the leader of Disaster Box, Hiroshima. Now, it's very unusual for Hiroshima to hang out with guys with Eruption, but it seems like that he found some respect with these guys. I don't know what's the real scenario between if he's planning to leave Disaster Box to go to Eruption. I don't know if that's the case, but I have to say it was a pretty good match. But however, I think the ending, we saw how Okatani is showing no fear to Yuki Naya. As you know, he's the biggest person on the planet, but unfortunately, he ended up in a bad submission by Naya, and he had no other choice but to tap out. Next up, we got members of Damnation, consistent of all of them: Minoru Fujita, Kanon, MJ Pauly, and the leader Daisuke Sasaki to take on Yuki Ishida and Kazusada Iguchi from I forgot what's the name of their unit, and they team up with members of another unit, Makoto Oishi and Yuji Ino of Omega. I thought that was a pretty interesting matchup because it kind of shows up. But however, it was Kanon who picked up the victory by doing a somewhat of a brainbuster onto Ishida, giving them the win. However, in this one, this is of course where we see now that Sasaki is seeing that why is Makoto Ushino back? That he feels that he should have just stayed out of this. So this led to that almost they try to take him out in the next event that took place on the I forgot what day was it, but yeah. Next up, we got a very interesting matchup. We have 37 Kamina, consistent of Toi Kojima, Mao, and Yukio Onoi, taking on CDK members Masahiro Takanashi, and Chris Brooks, where they team up with UK's very own Karanoi. I thought this match was pretty good because, we see that there was going to be that one match for the Universal title between Yuki Onoi and Kara Nor, but it was Nor who actually picked up the win by applying a chokehold on Toi Kojima, and Toi Kojima had no other choice but to tap. Next up, we have Takeshita Masada taking on, of course, one half of the KOD Tag Team Champions, Naomi Yoshimura. I thought this match was a bit fun because we see how Naomi Yoshimura, who has been much of a powerhouse in this particular match, but it was the big lariat that allowed him to win the match. As you know, he is a big guy, but Masada, he is, of course, the youngest and, of course, the newer member. He did held on as long as possible, but the lariat was just too much. And finally, our main event, we have Burning members Jun Akiyama, Tetsuya Endo, teaming up with, of course, member of Suzuki-gun and one-time student of Jun Akiyama, Yoshinobu Kanemaru. Yes, folks, basically he learned under his curve. They take on the members of 37 Kamina, Shun Katsumata, and, of course, Konosuke Takeshita, where they teamed up with Blue Justice, Yuji Nagata. I thought this match was good, because it showed a lot of character in this match because you got two veterans on both sides. And of course, you have two of the younger members. We got 37 Kamina, who are very talented, very good at what they do. Of course, you got Endo, who's been at the top of his game. And of course, Yoshin Kanemaru, who we know where he is. But in this particular match, it was, of course, Akiyama who picked up the win by pinning Katsumata in order to win the match. And of course, the celebration continues with Akiyama with the 30th anniversary. I thought the show was pretty good. I like it. It was very interesting. Of course, celebrating a legend like Jun Akiyama. And I think that's pretty much it what we have for DDT. So I believe it's time to move on with All Japan Pro Wrestling. Okay, All Japan Pro Wrestling with their much recent event, Mania in Korakuen Hall. This took place on the 19th of September. Opened up with tag team action. We had Black Mansuri and Uzanagi taking on Kuma Arashi and Koji Doi. Now, as I said before in the previous time when I reviewed the Budokan event that All Japan did, there was a lot of things that I missed, a lot of things I did not know. It appears that maybe Total Eclipse is already done for because it doesn't seem like, you know, Arashi and Doi are wearing gear from Total Eclipse, which is the faction that they're in. And it would make sense why. But seems that they're going as a tag team duo, and they're showing they're a bit of a powerhouse. But it was, of course, Arashi who picked up the win by applying a senton diving onto Black Mansuri that picked up the win. Next match, we have six-man tag team action. We have Rising Hayato, Tajiri, and Yoshitatsu teaming up with, taking on Atsuki Aoyagi, the current junior heavyweight champion, Christopher Daniels, and Cyrus. I thought this match was pretty good because I did not anticipate that Christopher Daniels will have a good teaming effort with both the current junior heavyweight champion and, of course, Cyrus. But it was Daniels that picked up the win with the best moonsault ever. As you know, that's one of his arsenals that he finished off, and boom, it went. But however, as you know, Aoyagi and Rising Hayato used to be part of the same team back then. Apparently, Hayato is now declaring that he wants to challenge for Aoyagi's junior heavyweight title, which of course makes more sense. But of course, Aoyagi will not back down from any challenger at all, since he won this title from Tiger Mask. Now, speaking of Tiger Mask, we have an old classic rivalry that we've been hearing and seeing for many years, or should I say decades, for almost a few decades. We have Black Tiger, 5th generation, I think, taking on, of course, their longtime rival, Black Tiger, or Tiger Mask. Now, you know the story about Tiger Mask and Black Tiger. They're both, Tiger Mask is the good, and of course, Black Tiger is the evil. The rivalry goes way, way, way back, and all this stuff. And I love the story of that. However, it was Tiger Mask that picked up the win by submitting Black Tiger. But however, that does not end there. Tiger Mask was intending to unmask Black Tiger, but referees were trying to stop him from doing that. But he's sending a clear message that this rivalry between them is not even over until it's over. Next match, we have more tag team action. We have Ryo Inoue, the current one, and of course Takao Omori, taking on Dan Tamura and Yuji Nagata, of course Blue Justice. I have to say it was a great team up. Recently Yuji Nagata has teamed up with Dan Tamura in the past. Recently, I did not see when they teamed up, but I have been following on Twitter for quite some time, and it was a pretty good team. But it was, of course, Dan Tamura that picked up the win by applying a Death Valley driver onto Inoue, giving him the win. Next match, we got another young boy named Yuma Anzai taking on, of course, the King, Minoru Suzuki. Now, we all know Minoru Suzuki. We know how he's going to... I would have assumed that he was going to finish him off with the Gotch-style power driver, but nope. He decided to give him a single leg Boston Crab. Yes, folks, that. And of course, Anzai had no other choice but to tap out. Next match, we got 8-man tag match. We have Akudo Omori, Shuji Ishikawa, Yuma Aoyagi, and of course, the former leader of Total Eclipse, Jake Lee, taking on Voodoo Murders, consistent of Toshizo, Minoru, Taru, and Suwama. Now, this, as you know, Voodoo Murders have been now declared as the top heels right now of All Japan Pro Wrestling. Back then, it used to be none other than Total Eclipse, but right now, Voodoo Murders are now taking over. So basically, they're taking matters in their own hands. But Suwama, as you know, recently lost the Triple Crown Championship to, to Kento Kirihara. Now they're challenging anybody that gets in their way. But I was a bit surprised that Shuji Ishikawa was the one who picked up the win when he pinned Suwama. So this must be a big disappointing loss for Voodoo Murders, but no, there's no doubt in my mind they will be getting revenge against Ishikawa for what he did. So we'll see what happens down the road for them. Now our next match is a semi-final match. We have the All Japan Pro Wrestling World Tag Team titles. We have the Saito brothers, Jun and Ri, taking on the current tag team champions, Gunner of Anarchy, consisting of Ryuki Honda and Shotaro Oshiro. Now, these guys recently have won these titles. I don't know how long, but I have to say it's a pretty good dynamic. As you know, the Saito brothers have been trying to make themselves establish more as a more tag team goal and try to obtain these titles. But however, it was a leg lock by Oshiro to Jun that gave them the ability to retain the titles. However, that does not end there. As you know, like we've seen in any other promotion, who's going to be the next challenger? Well, the answer is Kumashira and Koji Doi stepped up saying they will be the next challengers. So there's no telling when that will take place, but hopefully it can happen soon. Now our main event, we have the Triple Crown Championship. We have Kento Kiyahara, who just newly won this title from Suwama, taking on Naoyagi Nomura, who won the, of course, #1 contendership at Budokan against Jake Lee. I thought this match was going to be quicker because of how Nomura actually beat Jake Lee in less than a minute. But no, it went longer, up to 20, I believe. But, of course, it ended with Kento applying the German suplex that allowed him to retain the title. So I thought it was a great move. That gave him the ability to show that he's still on top. However, as always, I say before, there's always a challenger waiting to come out to issue the challenge. This time, I believe it's Takawa Mori who's going to challenge for the title. So we'll see what happens. So I don't know if he's ever challenged for the Triple Crown before, but we just have to wait and see what happens then. So I believe right now that's pretty much it what we have for All Japan. So let's move on with GCW Dead on Arrival. Okay, GCW DOA, or as we say it, Dead on Arrival. This one took place also in Japan on the 27th of September, but however, it wasn't streamed until the 1st of October. Now, this is once again the day after Planet Death, and this is also at Shin-Kiba First Ring. Now, our opening match, we have a 6-man tag team match. We have team number 1, Joey Janela, Nick Wink, and Young, Dumb, and Broke, Jordan Oliver to take on Strong Hearts, El Lindaman, Shima, and T-Hawk. Now, this was a pretty good match. I like this because it was an opener because I'm a fan of all of these guys. But when I think about Strong Hearts, I think about what great team they are, watching them. But I was impressed how this match went. But fortunately, Nick Wayne ended up in the wrong side of the Meteora by Shima, giving them the win. Next up, we have an interesting tag team match. We have Masato Tanaka teaming up with the Great Sasaki to take on Kikutaro and, of course, Jimmy Lloyd. Now, I asked myself this obvious question seeing Kikutaro and Jimmy Lloyd. How would they get along? Jimmy Lloyd is not the easiest person to get along, as you know, because he had that rivalry with G Raver and that sort of thing. But they did work enough. But unfortunately, it did not go well as they probably would have hoped, because Tanaka gave him the big elbow while he was sitting down, and that picked up the win for both Tanaka and the Great Sasaki. Next up, we have a somewhat of a death match, tag team match. We have the Southern Psycho, Mance Warner teaming up with Ratty Daddy, Ko'o Roderick, taking on Ryuji Ito and Abdullah Kodabayashi. Now, these two guys, if you guys know, they have been wrestling in in death matches before. We normally see Abdullah in Big Japan, Ito with freedoms, but it was great to see how it goes. But there was glass everywhere and all this, but it was Ito who picked up the win by applying a frog splash onto Cole Radrick, giving them the win. Now our next two matches are mostly singles matches with death matches involved. We have Schlonk taking on Masashi Takeda. Now this match was absolute brutal, nightmare, bloody, however you want to name it. You know, glasses, tube lights, everything you can use in order to make someone bleed. But it was a somewhat of a, not a suplex or what, I think like almost a suplex type onto by Takeda to Schlong that gave him the win. Now, our next match, this was a very unusual match for me because it's Effie versus Jun Kasai. Now, Jun Kasai, I have seen this guy. He is an absolute monster when it comes to death matches. And I think he's felt uncomfortable being around Effie because you know how Effie is. He's a very unique individual. But some people would say, oh, he's a little bit weird. But unfortunately, it did not go well for Effie because he ended up in the underhook pile driver by Jun Kasai, giving them the win. And Effie got away with it with giving Jun Kasai a kiss on the lips. So I thought it was so funny. Now our main event. This is a very interesting match. We have the champions on one side. We have the current GCW Tag Team Champions, the Mega Bastards, consisting of Alex Colon and John Wayne Murdoch. They team up with the current GCW Ultraviolent Champion, and we're talking about Rina Yamashita, taking on the faction known as Eri, consistent of Toshiyuki Sakuda, Violento Jack, and Drew Parker. Now, you probably would have assumed this is going to be a banger because we know what Alex Colon and John Wayne Murdoch can do because they're two of the most dangerous. And of course, Rina Yamashita, who is known as the Deathmatch Queen, she is in fact teaming up with two of the toughest SOBs on the planet. But it was Colon that picked up the win when he applied a Styles Clash onto Sakuda on top of the turnbuckle and landed on some glass, giving them the win. And then, of course, we broke down to a bit of what we see later on. I don't know if Watch Pro Wrestling will ever upload it. We're going to have GCW versus Freedoms. Now, it appears there's a bit of a dilemma. As soon as this match was over, it appears that Rina Yamashita sides with GCW. Now, I think Freedoms felt very disappointed in her, knowing that why would you side with them? Think about it. GCW has given her a lot of opportunities, and I think she's very grateful that they did that. And of course, she is the current Ultraviolent Champion. So we will, hopefully I get to see that event, but is yet to be seen until it happens. So we do got one more GCW event. It's going to take place on the 4th, which is taking place soon. And I think that's pretty much it. So let's move on with AEW Dark Elevation. Okay, our last review, AEW Dark Elevation, opened up with Sky Blue taking on Trish Adora. Now, it started out with Trish Adora extending her hand to Sky Blue, but of course she tried to take her down as fast as possible, but we know Sky Blue, what she's capable of. She finished her off with a somewhat of a flatliner type maneuver. I don't know if that's what it's called. It's not, I don't know if that's what it's called, but it did finish the job for her to pick up the win. Next up, we got Brian Cage, who we haven't seen for quite some time in the AEW ring. He being accompanied by Prince Nana to take on Hot Sauce Tracy Williams, who we know pretty well from Ring of Honor and other places like Evolve, who's a very capable technical wrestler. But however, it was of course the size advantage by Brian Cage, who's dubbed the Machine, taking on applied the drill claw onto Tracy Williams to pick up the win. Next up, we got Lance Archer taking on Cheeseburger. Now, this is another case of David versus Goliath, but however, we know Cheeseburger will not back down from a fight. He will look for an opening. but there's no opening when it comes to Lance Archer, but unfortunately, he ended up on the wrong side of the blackout, giving Lance Archer the win. Next up, it's been a while since we've seen her, Abaddon, taking on Abby Jane. Now, of course, Abby Jane, if you guys ever seen her, I mentioned her on the previous events, like her birthday that took place last year, I believe, and also Camp Leapfrog. Um, she has to face against someone who's unorthodox with her maneuvers, but of course, Abaddon applied the Black Delilah, giving her the win. But I want to put this note. If you guys notice, she had a new makeup look. I think this one is far more cooler than the one she used to apply in the past. Now, next up, we got the ROH six-man tag team titles on the line for the first time. We have Primal Field. Now, I don't know who these guys are. They take on Dalton Castle and the boys. I thought this was a fun match because, Dalton Castle and the boys are very impressive. But it was Dalton Castle that picked up the win when he applied the Bangarang onto one of them and allowed them to retain the titles. Next up, we got mixed tag team match. We have Kip Sabian and his wife Penelope Ford taking on Gia Scott and LSG. I thought this match was pretty fun, but however, we are now seeing how sharpened the skills Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford have begun. And of course, Penelope Ford tried the Mudo Lock onto Gia Scott to pick up the win. But there was one thing that is becoming clear, and I have to agree with Ian Riccaboni and Paul White mentioned that these two should be chasing for the AAA mixed tag team titles to prove who is the true power couple. Because right now we have Sammy Guevara and Time Mello, who are somewhat of a power couple, but who's the most dangerous one? That's yet to be determined. Next up, we got a Tony Deppen teaming up with Dante Martin to take on the Lucha Brothers. Now, you probably know, I have to say Tony Deppen, as you know, he has that a-hole type of attitude that we always seen, and I thought it was very interesting. But we have two dynamic types of wrestlers, like Dante and Ray are two of the high flyers, the best ones, and of course, Tony Deppen and Ray Phoenix are two of the technical wrestlers, and I think that felt a dynamic. But it was, of course, the package pile driver stomp onto, I think it was Tony Deppen, that fell and ended the match in the favor of the Lucha Brothers. Now, our main event, we have the Factory, consistent of Nick Comoroto, Cole Carter, Aaron Solo, and that worthless QT Marshall taking on the best friends, Chuck and Trent, along with Rocky Romero and Danhausen. I thought this was going to be a very unique match because normally we would see Orange Cassidy involved in this, but no, we just seen Danhausen. But one thing that was very interesting near the end is when Danhausen cursed Aaron Solo, that gave, of course, Trent Beretta the win, and I thought it was very cool. But I think the Factory are livid. But I think Trent Beretta is starting to see how reliable Danhausen can be, regardless of his weirdness. So I think it shows us maybe he could learn to trust him a little bit, even though it's going to take a while for them to open up to Danhausen. So I think that's pretty much it. So I believe it's time to move on to the recent press conference that Stardom talked about, and I'll be explaining every match and every scenario what took place along the way. So let's do that right now. Okay, now, as you know, I mentioned this on a news updates about Unagi not participating in 3 of the press conferences they did. This took place on October 3rd Japanese time. We have 3 different press conferences. The first one right now we're going to be talking about is the New Blood 5 that will be taking place soon. Matches have ever been set, but however, 3 matches have been announced recently. We have, of course, Mai Sakurai taking on Shantoya, who is from Triple P Tokyo, which is a local promotion based out of Tokyo. Not as a big promotion, but they are very, very fun to watch. But also, Shantoya has appeared in Kolega Pro Wrestling, where they had a bit of a rivalry with Momoka Hanazono. But one thing I did like about the press conference now with this one in particular, it appears that Shantoya is trying to gain the attention of founder Rousey Ogawa, trying to get him involved, that how good of a wrestler she is. That kind of drives a little bit of the jealousy of Maya Sakurai from what I can see, despite there was no translation. She's annoyed that Rousey Ogawa is fascinated by her skill set, and I think that pisses her off. Now, as you know, Maya Sakurai is always trying to prove that she is the strongest individual because now she's with DDM, and it drives her. And not to mention, from what Rousey Ogawa mentioned on his Twitter page, Maya Sakurai called him a pervert. I'm like, no, Rousey Ogawa knows when he sees a good talent. That's always been his MO. But the strange thing is, Julia brought her raw meat. It was like, what? And I think Shantoya's like, what was that all about? But we also, the other matches that we do know that it's already being placed already was Momokogo versus Rhythm. Momokogo really was dumb enough because she thought that Rhythm can speak Spanish due to the fact that she wore a mask. And she thinks that, oh, people who wear masks are from Mexico. Wrong answer. We do have a masked wrestler in Stardom, which is Starlight Kid. And Rhythm is also one of those. But I think that's going to be a very interesting match. I'm not sure how hype I'm going to be about it. But once it happens, we'll see. But of course, I think this one's going to be the main event where we have, of course, I'm not sure if it's going to be main event or not, but we have the Future of Stardom title being on the line. We have our current champion, Hanan, taking on Ami Sourei. Now, Ami Sourei qualifies as the challenge for this title since she only has 3 years of experience. In retrospective, Hanan requested that this match should take place at a New Blood event, and recently we have seen that on New Blood 4, where she faced Just Tap Out roster member AOI, which she came successful on that. So those are the 3 matches that are being set. But however, new matches have been set. Our first one, we have Queen's Quest members Lady C and Hinan to take on a very interesting dynamic group, Suzuki of Prominence and Amchun. Now, if you guys don't know who Amchun is, she is a freelancer based on Nagoya Prefecture. She hardly comes down in certain areas, only if you're from the certain regions. She recently appeared in Marvelous, which I reviewed not too long ago. She is one of, I think, Emi Sakura's students as well. She only appears on certain wrestling events, and also she's involved in hardcore death matches on certain occasions. And I think this dynamic between both Zuzu and her would be a very interesting team. Zuzu's not an easiest person to get along, from my understanding, but we'll see. Next up, we do have, of course, Godzai, Tomoka Inaba, who is the newest member, and Mirai, teaming up with World Diana roster member Nanami to take on Oda Tai's Starlight Kid and Ruka, and also from Diana, Aruka Imasaki. Now, we don't know what's the situation taking place with Umasaki. As you guys remember, last time on New Blood 4, she officially crossed the line by attacking Mirai with the chair, and that led to her to walk away. But of course, Starlight Kid did like what she saw. It's still unclear exactly what's going on. But this will be the first time we see Tomoka Inaba teaming up with Mirai. They know each other pretty well. They both knew each other from the Kantai Dojo days. And, of course, team up with someone else who's not part of the group, but that's going to be an interesting dynamic. And then finally, we have Cosmic Angel members Mina Shirakawa and Waka Tsukiyama, who's absent for this particular day. They're going to team up with Tropica Wild, Yuna Mizumori to take on Rina and Ram Kaicho, who are teaming up for the first time, where they team up with Linda, who made her debut on New Blood 4. But once again, as you know, Ram Kaicho threw the ectoplasma right on Yuna Mizumori, sending a clear message. So I don't know exactly what this one's going to be about, but it's going to be very interesting to see. We know that Waka still has some deep history with Ram Kaicho. I don't know exactly how this one's going to go. So I think this is for New Blood 5. Let's move on with the next press conference. Right now, we have the IWGP Women's Championship Tournament. As you know, this one has already been set. 4 leaders of the 6 of entered due to the pulling out of the stick with the tips. We saw Julia, we saw Utami, Mayu Iwatani, and Starlight Kid. Now, however, now that Natsuko Tora is back, she claim her leadership from Starlight Kid. Now, however, the overall matches appears that there's going to be some things taking place. It appears that Julia and Natsuko will not be participating in they kind of picked the person who they feel should be challenging for the titles. Natsuko Tora picked Momo Watanabe. And as for Julia, we know her situation where she's going to be challenging for the red belt in December. She picks Himeka. But as for Utami and Mayu, they will be, of course, staying. But on October 20, I think the 22nd, I believe, yeah. The 22nd, we will see Mayu taking on Momo Watanabe, and Utami Ayashida will be taking on Himeka. But, however, it was told that on the 23rd, we will see Kairi will be taking on Alpha Female to move on to the next round of the final. So this is the semifinal rounds, and whoever walks out from all those 4 ladies from the Stardom bracket, we'll see how that goes out to make it to the finals. Now, as you know, the time is we got, of course, the Goddesses of Stardom Tag League. Now, teams have already been assigned and who will be involved. So we have what block will be there. So let's start with the Red Goddesses block. We have Masakurai and Lady C. This is an interesting dynamic. These ladies don't like each other because Lady C is disgusted by Masakurai the way she accepted Julia's invitation to join DDM while she got attacked by Julia. And now they're calling themselves Lady Fairmare, May Fair Lady. So I don't know how this team is going to work. They're like our new version of Oil Water between Rina and Hana. So that'll be interesting. I have to say I like this dynamic duo than our next team. We have Suri and Tomoka Inaba of God's Eye. They're calling themselves Karate Brave. We have Mayu Iwatani and Momo Kogo. They team up. They're now dubbed as Peach Rock. Cool name. Then, of course, we got Julia and Tekla of DDM calling themselves Bella Mafia Bella. Momo Watanabe and Kid, known as Black Desire, as we always known. Of course, we have Saki Kashima and Fukigen Def, known as We Love Tokyo Sports. Then, of course, our current goddesses of Stardom, which is Tampo. Now they're calling themselves Meltier. Interesting name. And then, of course, we have Aphrodite, consistent of Utami Ishida and Sai Kamitani, who, of course, they have teamed up in the past. So that's pretty much for the red goddesses. Now for our blue goddesses, we have Ami, Sori, and Mirai from God's Eye. Now they're calling themselves as the New Eras. Mina, Shirakawa, and Saki, and now they're calling themselves, their team name is Kawild Venus. Interesting name. Hanan and Hina, they're also known as a team known as Wingori, which is a really interesting name. Then we have Azumi and Miyu Amasaki, now calling themselves O2 Line. Interesting name as well. Of course, the previous winners of the Goddesses Tag League, FWC, Koguma and Azuki. Then we do have Maka and Himeka, known as Mahim. Then, of course, members from the Neo Stardom Army, Nanane Takahashi and you calling themselves 7-Up. Don't ask me. And, of course, Oda-time members Natsuko Tora and Ruko, known as BMI 2000. So these are the teams that will be participating in the Goddesses Tag League. So we'll see what takes place on that. Now, there is going to be an event taking place on the 3rd of November called the Hiroshima Goddesses Festival taking place. Now, these are the matches that already been set that it's going to be involved. We have a special match between Himeka versus Yuna Mizumori. And I have to say, seeing Yuna Mizumori in Stardom is going to be a good thing. Since now they're allowing freelancers to come into Stardom, it's going to be fun. Then we have a gauntlet match. We have FWC, Azuki and Koguma. We have Stars, Saya Ida and Momokogo. Queen's Quest, Azumi and Miyu Amasaki. Moonsea reunited for the first time in almost a year or so. Waka Tsukiyama and Lady C. And then finally, Odatai members Saki Kashima and Ruka. Now, our next match, we have members of God's Eye, Mirai and Amisuri, and the return of Konami, taking on DDM's Julia and Mai Sakurai and Tekla. Now, as you know, recently we have been seeing Julia has been trying to persuade Konami to join DDM because, as you know, DDM has not been the strongest unit since Sudi left, and now is because Julia is, how do I say, hopefully she thinks that now that if she wins the red belt, that Konami would have a change of opinion. So we don't know if that's the case, how it's going to be. Now, our next match, we have a revenge match. This is between Utami Hayashida and Atsuko Tora, the two leaders of the respective factions. Now, if you guys remember, Utami Hayashida was the red belt champion until last year. She faced Natsuko Tora, but however, Natsuko Tora ended up hurting her knee, and she was out for almost a year. And now she's coming for revenge. Even if Utami doesn't have the red belt, she wants to get a little payback for what she did to her. Next match, we have Mayu Iwatani to take on Alpha Female, who is remembered as the second red belt champion, aka the World of Stardom. Now, keep in mind, Alpha Female and along of the members of the Neo Stardom Army want to show Rasugawa how pathetic he has become, changing the direction of Stardom, and she targets Mayu Iwatani, who's been considered now the icon of the promotion. So this is more of like, we're going to show you what real passion is all about. They think that Mayu does not have that. Now, our next three matches are championship matches. Our first one we have coming up, it's going to be taking place, is the Goddesses of Stardom, the tag titles. We have Tampoi, also known as Meltier, taking on Black Desire. So this is going to be interesting. As you know, Black Desire did defeated FWC for the tag titles, I think earlier this year, but now then they lost it back to FWC. Next match is the one match I'm looking forward to it. We have Saya Kamitani taking on Mina Shirakawa. As you know, Mina Shirakawa, during the tournament of the 5-Star Grand Prix, pinned Saya Kamitani, and that gave her an opportunity to challenge for the white belt. But the obvious question is, can Mina do that? We have seen Mina has improved a lot as a wrestler in the ring, becoming more methodical on targeting weak points of their opponent, like we saw that with Julia and Mayu and every other person. And I think that kind of shows she's now looks more like the Stardom are giving her the push that she needs. And then finally, we have Sudi versus Maika, former teammates, now enemies, as you know. Maika, as you know, has been desiring to win the red belt, but however, she has to go through Sudi because, as you know, anything can change from here on out for Sudi. She may not have the red belt before facing Julia. It could be someone else, but we'll see what happens then. So that's pretty much what took place in the press conference for all the matches presenting for these upcoming events. As I mentioned before, Unagi Sayaka will not be participating in these since she's going freelancing for a bit. I'm still digging on more information on her. I'll throw that on a separate video to see how that goes, what I can find. And I think that's pretty much it. So let's move on with our final thing, news updates. Okay, welcome to our news updates. As of October 1st, coming from the promotion GLEAT in Japan, it was announced that Masato Yoshino, who recently retired from pro wrestling, will be involved more often with the promotion, with the GLEAT promotion. More often, it turns out that he's been appointed commissioner of the G1 of the G Pro Wrestling division and also part of the GLEAT title belt administration committee. So it looks more like he is going to be involved as an administrator with the promotion or so. I have to say it's a good thing that he is getting involved in somewhat involved in pro wrestling, but not doing in-ring work. As you know, recently he has presented the belt. I did talk about how he gave the G Infinity tag title belts to to Kazuma Sakamoto and Wushige Kawakami. Now, keep in mind, Kazuma Sakamoto and Yoshino, they were once enemies, but it looks more like Kazuma Sakamoto is willing to let that go and move forward. But seeing Masato Yoshino getting involved as an administrator, I have to say it's going to be a good thing for him. Now, new information is coming from Ganbare Pro. Apparently, there's going to be a new trainee they have. This one is a former and legendary cabaret club girl named Lyra. Apparently, she has been involved with Ganbare Pro. As you know, they're trying to gain Yoshi wrestlers involved with Ganbare Pro. They're not an official. The Ganbare Pro is one of those few promotions that are co-ed that allows both men and women involved. But it's a good thing. So she's been practicing and she will be serving as second duties. If you guys don't know what that means, second duties, that means they'll be ringside giving support and all this other stuff. So now, updates for the upcoming event by Deadlock Pro Wrestling for their Carolina Classic. It appears that Gringo Loco, who was set to appear on the Carolina Classic this month, will not be there to face Kobe Corino. So they found a replacement, and is none other than Speedball and our current X Division champion, Mike Bailey. And I'm very surprised he's a capable wrestler, but that's gonna be fun. I can't wait to see what else is gonna take place. House of Glory, as you know, just announced for their upcoming event, pay-per-view event called the Exodus, that will take place on the 29th of October. No information yet who will be participating or what championship matches will be involved. That is something that will be determined. GCW update. We do have that the fact GCW will be making their way back to St. Louis on the 3rd of December. No information either what event will be taking place or what matches will be booked. Get ready for this, folks. We have Defy Wrestling out of the Seattle-based promotion for their upcoming event, Kingdom Come, on the 29th of October. It's just been told that Tom Lawler will be facing off the King, Minoru Suzuki. That's going to be a hell of a match, and I definitely hopefully get to see it. And finally, as you know, October 4th, if you guys know this or not, it is declared as the 2nd year anniversary for Mina Shirakawa from Cosmic Angels. As you know, Mina Shirakawa joined the promotion 2 years ago. That was the day where she faced Tam Nakano and they became friends, and now they're a part of the unit known as Cosmic Angels, my favorite unit that I get to enjoy to watch. So congratulations, Mina, on your 2nd year anniversary. Hopefully you win that white belt. That's what I want to see. She deserves the white belt. So I think that's pretty much it what we have for our news updates. So let's just call it a day. Well, I hope everybody enjoys this episode. Coming up, since we know it's Tuesday Wrestling, next we got NWA, AEW Dark, and of course NXT. We're gonna be doing Tuesday Wrestling as always, but however, I will be watching as well, reviewing the latest Ganbare Pro event. Don't know the name of it, but it does features Yuna Manaze challenging for the Spirit of Ganbare World Openweight Championship from Hartley Jackson, and that's going to be a very interesting matchup. And I don't know what other matches will be taking place, but that will be that. If there's any news updates regarding pro wrestling, I'll do that. But I will also do a separate video in case there's more information about Unagi, because right now if any dirt sheets out there are misleading about what's going on, that's going to be on a separate thing. So I think that's pretty much it what I'm putting out there for now on this end of the part of the video. So I'll see you guys in the next DWZ time. Same DWZ channel. I must bid all of you adieu. So goodbye. Mwah. and have a nice day. Bang!